know if I'm in low res here, but okay, we are back. We are again. I'm flying solo, so it's John Crump live without John Crump. So I have a guest today who's somebody that I've known for a number of years and got to go shooting with a number of times. And let's see, did we lose his stream? Dun
Oh
dun
no.
dun. We got no video. We got audio. So we have JC Hall. He's solo in the studio. The buttons were all pushed right before. Oh, all right. So he dropped out. He's going to be rejoining. And so Crump is all sorts of interested. I really had JC on because John is all sorts of interested in what's going on in Ukraine. And JC is a Russian linguist and was with I'm not sure what branch of the military, but intelligence. And he had an interesting take. I was watching his podcast about the Wagner Group. I got to say it right. My mom was fresh off the boat from Germany, so I got a decent amount of German heritage. So I'd like to be able to say it correctly. Also, JC was fresh off the Alex Jones show. So he and his wife, Chris Ann Hall, were our four. And Chris Ann is a constitutional scholar that does a lot of work for all of our rights and a lot of education. I see JC in the background. I'm going to bring him in hot. JC, I was
Apologies.
talking you up, giving you a big intro. You're just on Alex Jones, and now you're here. So
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah, it was great. Alex has been here in Tampa for a few days. I think pastor of the church here at the river put him and his family
Oh,
up, trying to give him some rest and encourage him. And so he was running his show from the church studio here. And so we were live. I think the fourth hour. Chris Ann and I were on with Alex Jones, and so it was a lot of fun.
oh, very cool. Okay, and that's River Church, as in the same River Church that's in West Palm Beach.
Yeah, yeah. Matter of fact,
Oh, cool, cool.
that's part of the River Revival Ministries International Ministerial Association, RMIMA. So they are a RMIMA member.
And our church, or I should say, I don't want to say our church, the West Palm Beach branch for Father's Day, they raffled off a shotgun. So
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Am I out of focus here? It looks like
I don't know if it's low bit rate or.
let me check. The power went off for some reason with the camera. I don't even know how that happened. So a lot of times the focus like resets, so I can't quite tell where I'm at. And with my eyeballs, I'm probably not good enough.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it looks okay from
I
here,
don't
I
know.
guess.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just low bit rate on my end. So we're talking a little bit pre-show, but you had a podcast about the Wagner Group and what was going on, and I was wondering if you could run down some of that information.
Where to start? And it's been pretty crazy. I think everybody's watching the 24-hour uprising, march to Moscow, march for justice, as Prigozhin was calling it. Um, so pretty interesting there. But I don't know how much everybody knows watching, but PMC Wagner is a um, paramilitary mercenary group that Prigozhin uh, admitted to starting in 2014. He says to defend the people of Donbass, um, and PMC Wagner has essentially operated as President Putin's private assassin squad and private mercenary army all around the world. They're in conflicts in Syria. They're all over Africa. Um, so Prigozhin, Yevgeny Prigozhin. So for those that don't know, so Yevgeny Prigozhin, from St. Petersburg, grew up St. Petersburg, started out wanted to be a professional skier. That didn't happen. He ends up, as a 18-year-old running with a bunch of hooligans. By the time he turns 20, he got arrested, and thrown in prison for stealing, robbing and stealing, uh, out of some upscale apartments in, what was then Soviet Leningrad. It's now St. Petersburg. He was released in 1990 and starts a hot dog stand with his mom, and they start making money. He parlays that into, one of the first grocery chains in St. Petersburg. Um,
Wow.
yeah, ends up going into business with, in casino, operations with a partner, and that's likely where he met, really began to develop a relationship with now President Putin, because at that time, Putin was the chairman over casinos and gambling. He was a government chairman over casinos and gambling.
Hmm.
So it's likely, they say, that's where they begin to make their connection and friendship. Um, in the midst of that, some of the stuff successful, not so successful, but I say he probably built his sort of mafioso ties, because you get the fall of the Soviet Union at that time in 1990, and you have the so-called entrepreneurial spirit, that takes
Hmm.
off. He's part of that, but a lot of that entrepreneurial spirit was, the former party bosses and, whoever could rise to the top, dividing up the spoils and getting rich. So anyway, he moves along. He ends up starting some restaurants. One particular restaurant, I think it's called New Island or something like that, is this sort of this ship, rusted out ship that they refurbished, and it becomes one of the top, like, high end luxury experiences there. George Bush has been served there. Um, Putin had some big events, birthday, and all sorts of things, and then he gets these, contracts, government and military contracts, to feed and cater, the military and schools in Russia, $1 billion contracts.
Oh wow.
So ends up, I mean, very entrepreneurial, and
Hmm.
driven businessman, and parlays that into, uh, was apparently a sizable fortune. He has this massive yacht, planes, um, mansion, all this sort of stuff. Then through Wagner, he's operating in all these foreign conflicts, particularly in Africa and the Central African Republic, and one of the other places over there, in particular Libya. Uh, and uh, his Because the corrupt, how corrupt stuff is over there and how they do things, he parlays his work, the military work, into ownership, or at least extraction of minerals and diamonds, these mines and whatever. So,
Whoa.
so he's got his fingers in a lot of stuff. His wife is a big business person in St. Petersburg, has a chocolate factory, a hotel, a spa. Um, and apparently he also, started and ran what's known as the Internet Research, Agency, which is the one accused of attempting to interfere in U.S. elections and elections wherever they can. And he said he has. Yes, we tried to influence and interfere in U.S. election, and I will continue to do so. This is his own words, saying
Hmm.
this. So a lot of this stuff, they talk about, he's done this, he's done that. He himself says these things. So, uh,
And he has, was it a Telegram channel?
yeah, he's a pretty prolific social media guy. A Telegram channel. He's always making videos and all this stuff. Um, Here's the thing, and by the way, I don't know what you said when I was in the dark, but I worked
Well,
as
I
a
gave a
Rush.
little bit of an introduction. What service were you in?
Yeah, so I was in the Navy and Russian linguist, military language instructor, worked for the National Security Agency. So, the Soviet history, communism, Marxism, Russian history has been my focus for 30 plus years. So just to give a sense of, oh, here's some
Hmm.
guy just reading a Wikipedia page and talking about Russia or whatever.
Right.
Um, so no, this is what I've done. I mean, coming straight out of high school is what I went into in military intelligence and, doing all that. So this is like who I was for, uh, most of my adult life. And then even when I got out of the Navy, I continued to uh, stay in contact with this history and all this sort of stuff. So, uh, so it's a thing, which is I guess in contrast. I talked about this on the podcast the other day. Is in contrast to the idiots, just the complete morons and clowns that are in the foreign
Right.
policy establishment, the Western foreign policy establishment today. It's really shocking how stupid these people are. Now, on the one hand, they're stupid, but then on the other hand, there's a level of they know what they're doing, and a lot of the overlords put incompetent, ignoramuses in these positions because it furthers the chaos that they desire. You know what I mean? That's like, for me, one of the reasons Biden got where he is and is still where he is, because like no reasonable
Right.
person would imagine anyone would want a person like that. Like if you legitimately wanted, okay, this is the president and we want him to be able to do things and be competent, be credible. No reasonable person would want to, even if you're a Democrat, would want to keep that guy there, right?
Right. I
So they
figure you
know
go
he's
with somebody like
incompetent.
Warren
Yeah,
or
they know he's a zombie, but that makes him a
Mhm.
puppet, and his
Correct. Yeah.
bumbling imbecility uh, furthers their desire for chaos, not only here but all over the globe. So
And
anyway,
and I
um,
I I believe the same way, and I believe
yeah,
that's why they picked Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris was first loser. She didn't even make it to
yeah,
the first primary vote.
correct.
And who can you control more than somebody that has zero gravitas?
Exactly. Yeah, they want puppets. They have a
Mhm.
lot of them. So the point is, you can't really you can't listen to establishment foreign policy experts uh, to really get your understanding of the Russian national psyche, the Russian political psyche, and what's happening, what they would likely do and not do, or what we should do. Somebody like Brennan. I mean, I remember listening to Brennan, just a complete buffoon, and the time leading up to this Ukraine Russia conflict. He's supposed to be speaking with some authority and credibility. Just a complete utter moron. And I remember hearing him. They were talking about, here are these forces arrayed on the Ukraine border. And we can talk about that in a second, by the way. And we see this stuff, and they're doing this and they're amassing. And I remember him talking about, oh, Putin's a blowhard. He's all talk. He doesn't mean anything. He's no threat whatsoever. Just totally playing like this guy's a simp. Blah 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 blah. And I'm thinking, what is this guy talking about? Are you crazy? Who have you been watching for the last 20 years? Right? Putin wrote his own autobiography. He's got a 23-year history in power where he's at now, plus being mayor in Moscow, everything previous to that, KGB chief, all this sort of stuff. So they act like they knew nothing about this guy, and somehow, you know, uh, they knew what was going to happen. Yet you heard them talking like, wait, you don't even know who he is. How are you telling us what he's going to do and what's going to happen? Um, Now, as far as back at that moment, the Russia's moving troops to the border. I would always tell people like this: imagine if North Korea, like you woke up and North Korea had, uh, you know, gotten a foothold in Canada and Mexico. Like you always you see this like, oh, here's the influence or whatever, and then there's troops, there's missiles positioned in Mexico and Canada. What do you think would be the response of the United States of America, right? So this crazy talk of, oh my God, Putin's putting troops on the border of Ukraine. Guess what? The border of Ukraine is the border of Russia. Like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
NATO does this essentially slow roll invasion over 30 years, all the way up to the Russian border, Ukraine, and one other spots, like the last piece of geography before NATO occupied the entire western border of Russia. What did you? Oh, and by the way, you put a clown in as president of the Ukraine, who then said,
Former actor.
we're going to join the EU. We want to be a member of
Right.
NATO. So he starts telegraphing, we're going to join the organization that was created with the sole express purpose of destroying Russia. We're about to join. Haha, look at me. I mean, total buffoon. And so now it's, oh my gosh, you mean Putin's moving troops and he's going to react to this move against Russia and this rise of anti-Russian, pro-Western sentiment in the Ukraine. Wow, we're all shocked. So you heard the
Hmm.
foreign policy idiots talking all this talk like it's nothing. We don't know what's going to happen, which is a mixture of the imbeciles that don't know anything, and then their globalist overlords who actually
Hmm.
know what the reaction is going to be and are pushing in that direction because they know Putin's going to react. And now we have another gravy train revenue stream where the military industrial complex can keep selling death on the backs of the taxpayers while we just send
Yep.
free money and blank checks to keep this war going, to keep Ukrainians dying, to keep Russia dying. The other piece of that puzzle is the fact that when the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union fell, that was a great opportunity for the West. Right? If we believed what they were saying, this was a great opportunity for the Western military and foreign policy diplomatic apparatus to stand up and say, "Great, we defeated the Soviet Union. Wonderful. We've accomplished our mission, our goal. Now let's bring Russia into the first world. Let's make them an ally. Let's do business,
Hmm.
right? Let's
Hmm.
all buy and sell together." But that wasn't the case. For those folks, the Cold War never ended. For them, the last piece of the puzzle, they had to go all the way into Moscow and take down Russia itself. So the Cold War never stopped for these folks. So when they said, here's NATO and we're not going to add any more countries, we're not going to move any closer to the border
Right.
of Russia, total lie, because for
Hmm.
them it wasn't over. We haven't finished. And so ever since, they've been poking the bear, prodding the bear, and they know they have this guy sitting in Moscow. They know his character. Go read his autobiography, go follow his history, look at the things he's done. So they know, hey, if we keep poking this guy, he's going to do something. And then that's a great
Hmm.
opportunity for us. So all of this stuff has been by design, by manipulation, and has brought us to where we are today. Now, I do know there's plenty of plenty of other elements and a mixture of false flag and fake news and fake videos and this kind of stuff. Nevertheless, there's plenty of it. There is a real conflict. There's plenty of it that is real, that people are losing their lives all because of this Western military industrial complex globalist manipulation and setup that's taking place. So none of this really surprises the people that have designed and made it happen. So that's kind of the background, and then we get to the actual the conflict taking place. You've got Prigozhin running this paramilitary assassination squad essentially on behalf of Putin. He's taking out whoever they believe are the enemies, the opponents, the dissidents, and we've seen many of those assassinations. We've also seen, by the way, I in my opinion, I mean, are you on YouTube? I don't want to get you thrown off or kicked off.
Yeah, we're on YouTube.
But in my opinion, I think some of these Western intel services have taken advantage of, having Wagner as a patsy. So yes, I believe PMC Wagner has assassinated people on behalf of Putin, certainly, but I think it's not unlikely that Western intel services have also assassinated people, and point the finger at Wagner because it adds to their justification, of having this enemy and who's the bad guy and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. So anyway, but Prigozhin reveals finally later, he admits to founding PMC Wagner and leading it. He's funding it, and Kremlin's funding it. And so he ends up, and here's another thing to be clear, the core of these mercenaries, the core of PMC Wagner are like Spetsnaz, special forces, regular troops, out of the regular army. So he's like top-notch bad dudes. Now, later, and certainly in this conflict, they've recruited felons out of the prison system and filled the ranks with these guys are just prisoners in promising them freedom if they'll fight. But some people try to characterize Prigozhin's just, he's an ex-con, and this is just a bunch of ragtag felons. That's not the case. There are plenty of those, and that's what they use as cannon fodder, which is how the Russians have fought wars for the last 1,500 years. But but make no mistake, the core of these guys are serious business. There's no question about it. And it's not like Prigozhin is some special forces elite guy, but he's a savvy, uh, smart businessman who's really known how to, how to make his star uh, rise. Russia was doing business with the West, the only ones who got rich. Yeah,
Oh,
KGB, right?
sorry.
No, it's exactly right. Exactly right. And it's even
Eh,
bigger than that. I don't want to get off on a rabbit trail, but even a lot of the former Soviet prowess and the Soviet big monster and the Soviet scare, they were none of that without the West building it. I mean, you go back and
mhm,
research
mhm,
all the industrial stuff and the military stuff. Western engineers, Western scientists from the United States, from Great Britain,
sure.
even this contested area in Donbass, and that reason Donetsk and Donbass with the big dam there, the big steel works there, that was all built by the West. So a lot of the big Russian army, boogeyman, um, was a lot of bluster in some sense, and it
Mhm,
was thanks
mhm,
to the West. And even the stuff, after the fall of the Soviet Union and all the former KGB tops and the party bosses and all this stuff, this was collaboration with Western globalist interests, to get people into these power positions so that they could further their agenda. The problem is they don't know Russian culture, and they think they could just buy loyalty from a lot of these folks. They thought they could buy loyalty, and you just can't. Some of because they'll take your money, they'll do a few things for a little while, but then they'll betray you and turn all that cash into their own empire. I mean, Russians.
mhm,
I don't even like to use, and I'm not talking about Russian individuals. I'm talking about the Russian national psyche, the Russian political psyche, the political realm and these political machinations. Uh, I don't like to use the word loyal or loyalty when you're talking about the Russian politic. Russians follow whoever the alpha is. That's how Russian politics operate. So we try to put this
mhm.
sort of Western ideal over their political culture, and it just doesn't fit. So when you see this Yevgeny Prigozhin, I think, started believing his own legend. He's out there on the front lines of this. He's not a special forces guy, but now he's in the thick of it and he's leading, and he's a big tough guy, and it's sort of typical alpha dog Russian mentality. And so now he thinks he can just rise up and he's going to take on, admittedly incompetent generals that are leading the regular forces, and so I think that's what you saw uh, to a great extent. Um, aside from whatever CIA influence there might be, we don't know for sure, and a lot of stuff that what may or may not have been really going on in various aspects. Only time will tell. But the thing about the Russians and Russian politics, they're always layers. I mean, most 9 times out of 10, what you see is not what you get. What you see is not really what's happening. That's just the way they operate. That's just the culture. So it's been a weird thing. It's one of those things you have to keep paying attention to. Watch the next turn of events, uh, because the politics there is so deceptive and so snaky, sort of behind the scenes. Growing out of the Soviet culture where everything was fake and manufactured. So you really never know entirely what's happening.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong. Russia has an economy the size of Texas. Is that about right?
Yeah, it's not a large economy. It's not a large country. 140 million population, at the most. So it's not a big place.
So they can't afford large weapon systems programs. All of this is on a much tighter budget.
Yeah, they're not massively supplied. You know, I think that the prisoner recruitment is a great example. Different thought process, different approach. So
Hmm, hmm.
it's the way Russians have always fought war. I mean, if some, I'm sure some of the viewers here probably are kind of World War II, World War One knowledgeable, and how even in the Stalin years, and they're just throwing bodies. You can go and see
Yep.
Russia lost more bodies in the war than anybody else because that's how they fight. They just
Right.
throw bodies. Like when you look at Prigozhin's forces, the um, even the regular army, by the way, if you notice the first days, and we see this 40-mile column of these
Oh yeah.
conscripts just sitting there getting blown off the road, because that's how
Yep.
Russia operates. I have a sense probably that these guys were sent there and they're more or less the distraction, while PMC Wagner is somewhere positioning, taking positions, and the real work was going on elsewhere.
Hmm.
As you start to see this sort of, first off, again, the Western moronic foreign policy going. He's going to this mad rush to Kiev. He's going to take over Kiev and knock down Kiev. And from the initial days, I thought, what? This doesn't make any sense. Why they're not? That's not how Russian forces function. Why would they be doing that? And you see this little mad dash. And, oh my goodness, they didn't make it and they failed, and we repelled the move to Kiev and take over Kiev. They're going to take over Kiev in 24 hours was their goal. I think it's utter nonsense. I think that was a feint. And then all of a sudden you see the aftermath is this, they have all this position where the things surrounding, and they're slowly squeezing, taking territory. So this whole rush to Kiev, I think, was a distraction. It's the way the Russian forces operate. And it was, I think the aftermath demonstrated that. But the idiotic West, who, we've, since at least Obama, I mean, really, honestly, by the way, probably since after World War II, I mean, all your major leadership in U.S. military forces has been political. It wasn't political. We
Hmm.
were done with real war generals. World War II. That's like a thing of the past. Never again. So really, all of our leaderships have been political, and then it's gotten just worse and worse with Obama, where the Obama administration began this kind of purge of military leadership, where not only are they political, but they must be political and be adherents to this, our ideology of you need to be willing to turn against American citizens. You need to support the radical globalist agenda. Now we see was the guy that's head of morale in the army. He's on social media attacking people, saying this is assault and harassment when you express opinions contrary to the radical pedophile agenda. This is the army head of army morale doing this. So this is the kind of leadership you have in the American military, in the foreign policy establishment, and they're doofuses. They have no clue, because they don't know they don't know what our generals of the past knew, and they have no
Right.
experience in that. And they stay in their little luxury hotels while the rabble, the sons and daughters of the rabble, are sent out to kill themselves for the bankers and for the oil, and all this stuff. So all your leadership are just globalist stooges. They're morons. All they're concerned about is their own personal advancement and their own luxury and their own lives and their political positioning. So that's how you end up with, one of the dumbest military men ever on the planet, Milley, who's
Oh my
constantly
God.
running his claptrap about stuff he knows nothing about. So anyway, I just thought the analysis of all this thing was, half propaganda, half idiocy from the get-go. And, I mean, Milley very early on, many days ago now, declared, Russia's lost, the war's over, and we're just cleaning up and all
Hmm.
this kind of stuff. I mean,
Hmm.
like how many people have died since then? We're in day 400, some odd, whatever, of this skirmish going on. I mean, it's crazy. Number one, 1,500 years. This is all the Ukrainians and Russians have ever known. Okay. There's an inculcated cultural bigotry. It's like the Bloods and the Crips.
Hmm.
You're not gonna flip that. So the best thing we can do is get out of it. Don't support Ukraine. Don't support Russia. Mind your own
Right.
business. Stop instigating stuff all over the world, sending our money and setting up to send our sons and daughters to die for
Right.
nonsense, and pushing us to the edge of World War III by making Russia more dangerous. This whole thing with Prigozhin has created a more dangerous situation, because now you have potential fracturing in public perception and military perception of their leader, which opens the door for the hardliners, to move in. Putin is an absolute moderate compared to these guys, regardless of the
Hmm.
goofy
Hmm.
narrative that you hear out there about, Putin being Hitler 2.0. Complete utter nonsense. He's a choir boy compared to some of these guys standing in the wings. And
Right.
so if the CIA was instigated any of this, thinking idiotically you could buy the loyalty of Prigozhin, right? What was the outcome of that?
Hmm.
One, either he said, hey, Putin, they cut me a check to do this. What do you think? Okay, go do it. Then they split the money. Um,
Right.
Probably less likely. more likely Prigozhin himself, because this is kind of military, I mean, Russian alpha dog mentality. He's going to take the money just for himself, thinking I'm so popular. All these guys are backing me because I've been shoulder to shoulder with them in the fight. And by the way, you saw 25,000 of them follow him, and even more as he went along. So he, if that was the case, I think it was probably all for him. And now he's moving over to Belarus. Lukashenko's given him his own military base, a defunct military base. So you can move in here, you can have this base. So my sense is it wasn't complete theater in the sense of not every aspect of it was theater. I think, but I do think there might have been some individuals and organizations capitalizing on some things and provoking some things. But at the end of the day, Prigozhin is going to be a guy who's for Prigozhin. He's not going to be, let me fight for NATO, let me fight for the West, let me do the CIA's bidding. That's not going to happen. He's an ultra nationalist, and that's just what it is. So, in light of all that, why is it more dangerous? Because again, you have this fracturing in Russia. Your leader has to be alpha dog. So Putin's now in a crazy position, and it's weird that Prigozhin never mentioned Putin. He only mentioned the two generals he was going after. So the Western media reported a coup to overthrow Putin.
Right.
Prigozhin never said any of that. And I listened to his videos in Russian. I know what he said. So he never named Putin. The closest time he's ever gotten to criticizing Putin is when he was criticizing the two generals, Shoigu and Gerasimov. Is when he was criticizing them and says maybe grandpa has lost the flock.
Oh, shoot.
Which seemed to be a clear reference to Putin, which I take as him trying to provoke Putin to do something about these generals.
Right.
Now, Prigozhin came back later and said, no, that's not who I was talking about. That's not what I meant. That's the only time he's ever come close to saying anything like that. Putin has never called his name, never criticized him directly in that sense. Now, Putin talked about, this move and whatever, and his latest thing he gave was very muddled, because at the one time he called he threw out this general label of traitors. This is traitorous and whatever, but then at the same time he says, but these guys are patriots, and they were misled and made a mistake, and influenced by whoever and outside forces, this and that. So it's like he was trying to give Prigozhin space. And then another contradiction, he says, this is the gravest danger that the motherland was in, this internal, uprising, whatever, and it was going to be massive bloodshed. Then at the same time, in the same speech, he says that there was never any threat because we had it handled. We would have crushed it. We were all prepared, and they turned around and whatever. So a lot of contradictions coming out of how he's talking about this, and a really weird, feeling that he doesn't want to go after Prigozhin personally. Like, is this because of your relationship, or is this because you're scared of the fact that this dude still has your assassin squad that could be turned against you? But nevertheless, you think about public perception from a Russian cultural perspective, Putin doesn't look like alpha dog anymore. And so they're like, what's going on? So this begins to create this crack that opens the door for who knows what. And so you're talking about a nuclear power with hardliners who said, we want to get a hold of the nuclear power so we can nuke Europe, we can nuke America, we can nuke the West. And I think they mean it when they say it. And so I think, whoever was manipulating this has brought us into a much more dangerous situation with Russia by destabilizing it, which is the MO of CIA and all of those provocateurs. This is how they do business. So, this is where we are, because I think the globalists, a good portion of that globalist group wants World War III. They want to provoke this chaos, and this puppet administration that we have now in Washington, D.C. feeds that, goes along with that. So we said today when we were on the Alex Jones show, I said this as we were closing, that we've said about many elections that this is the most critical election in American history, and it's do or die for America. I think we're at the point now it's do or die for the planet. We've moved beyond do or die for America. With this administration, particularly what they're doing in Russia and in the Ukraine, you're talking about setting the stage for World War III, setting the stage for the annihilation, not simply of America, but the annihilation of humanity, because these people are absolutely unhinged and out of their mind. So I think this is incredibly critical where we are now. That's why I think they're so desperate. That's why they're targeting President Trump with all this indictment. They're doing everything they can to take him
Hmm.
out, um, and targeting Christians, conservatives and Christians and Catholics in particular, and just is the parents, children, just breakneck speed of complete and utter lunacy. So I think we're on that knife's edge now. I think they're increasing our, um, how shall I say this, increasing the opportunity, because I think, um, the more the crazier they get, the more they break, then the more they wake people up, the more they turn people against them who weren't even paying attention. The more they
Hmm.
sow the seeds of their own demise. So I think where we are now, uh, bad news is good news, right? The more bad news we hear out of that crowd, the better it is for an ultimate solution. The scary part is we're on the razor edge of what could happen to get us to that point before enough people have a great enough appetite to want to fix what's going on, which I don't think we're there yet. So more stuff has to break, for
Hmm.
us to be
Hmm.
fixed. But the danger is some of that breaking may be absolute nuclear holocaust, which I don't think we want to get to that in needing to try to fix that, because how do you come back from something like that? So very
So,
critical. We're at a very critical moment of getting the truth out, getting Americans awakened and active more than they ever have before, state level, local level, and at the federal level. And for sure, just in case, stock up on your potassium iodine tablets. Duck and
oof,
cover.
right, right. So, is Putin's move to show that he's still a tough guy, to do some sort of tough guy action?
I think from a Russian political culture perspective, I don't see how Putin can't act. It would be very un-Russian to do
Right,
nothing.
right.
So that's why it's really strange, to hear his reaction. Um, he seems very conflicted, and I don't know why. Um, Again, his relationship or whatever, because apparently, Lukashenko comes out. It's hard to know when you can believe any of what these guys are saying, especially a guy like Lukashenko. But he was given a press conference about, um, you know, what his phone call was like with Putin, what his conversation was like with Putin when he's trying to broker this peace between him and Prigozhin. And he says that he's telling President Putin, call the guy. Let's call the guy. And Putin says he won't take my call. He won't listen. It's pointless.
Oof.
Yeah. So he's upset, but then it's like almost within that, like this sense of, yeah, he didn't want to, he didn't want to just whack the guy. Although, according to
Mhm.
Lukashenko, Putin's attitude was just destroy Wagner, just get rid of him. Now, here's one other side of that maybe it was Putin just wanting to take him out, because there's a lot of bad things that come out of how brutal, uh, Wagner was, how brutal, Prigozhin was, and how they treated the regular army. I mean, there's a video of this sergeant or whatever. They kill him smash him with a sledgehammer or whatever, like
Oof.
videotape it, and Prigozhin's just sort of making fun and whatever. It's a lot of stories like that, and I could easily imagine, Putin got to the point where, these are rabid dogs that have to be put down, and maybe the attack that Prigozhin talked about, that the regular army, attacked them with helicopters and bombing them, and then the artillery and whatever. It could have come on Putin's orders, which then, uh, obviously they failed because his generals are incompetent. But then that puts, Putin in that position of, well, now I can't fire these two generals, or I'm going to look like Prigozhin's calling the shots. And then number two,
Right.
I was the one that gave the order to take out, um, Wagner in the first place. So then if I fire
Mm-hmm.
these two generals, they're going to spill the beans.
Mm-hmm.
So it really seems like he's in a weird situation. And then here you go, letting Prigozhin go to Belarus. They reported criminal charges were filed against him. Now, some say investigation's still going on, but then Putin says all charges are dropped. We're not going to pursue this. You get to go to Belarus. So then you got the public looking on going, hey, you let this guy break the law and get away and do whatever. So Putin's looking weak no matter which way you spin it,
Ouch.
which is not good for a Russian leader. So to
Mm-hmm.
your question, I don't know exactly what he could do, except perhaps take out both generals and Prigozhin. If he killed both generals and had Prigozhin fall out of, a high building in India, like one of the other guys did, maybe that may be his solution. And then the Russians can say, "Yay, we got our alpha dog leader back. We can still follow him. He's tough." So who knows?
That would be the least painful thing for the rest of us to happen.
That would be the most Russian thing to do from a Russian political standpoint. And again, don't misconstrue. I'm not talking about individual Russians, please. I was very upset at the bigotry against Russians individually when all this thing broke out and what was going on over there. And all of a sudden, Russians are getting attacked and insulted, and guy gets eaten by a shark, and they're celebrating the death of this guy just because he's a Russian. Like, what is people are insane.
Wow.
So I'm not talking about Russians individually. I'm talking about the political sort of psyche and culture that's demonstrated itself throughout Russian history.
Huh. So, all right. So, origins of Wagner Group. I gotta say it right. I so want to say it American. I heard that it was because Prigozhin is such a fan of Hitler, and Hitler loved Wagner, and that's why he called it Wagner Group.
I have no idea. I don't know that I've ever heard him speak on that. I don't know. I don't know what I've heard from him. That doesn't really resonate with me, but I'm not saying it's impossible. But I can check into that and see if I can dig around to see if he himself, he likes to talk. So maybe I can dig around and see what he says himself from why that name. I'm not certain on that.
So which I think the crazy thing is in our modern social media world is this guy is on Telegram. You don't have to watch CBS or NBC if you're a Russian linguist.
Yeah.
You can hear from the horse's mouth what's going on.
Correct. No, it's very easy. I mean, even on Twitter, I follow a bunch of I use Twitter as an intel collection source. And speaking of that, there, I don't know if people are aware watching probably that there's something called OSINT, open source intelligence. There are tons of people, with modern privatization of surveillance and satellite imagery and all this sort of stuff. There's a huge OSINT community just right on Twitter. So you can go find out what's going on, practically firsthand on Telegram and on Twitter. You do not need legacy media or anything like that. And so even if it's like foreign with here's Prigozhin doing a video, Putin giving a speech, somebody will write a translation. It's nothing to then ask somebody that speaks Russian, could say, is this an accurate translation? So you really can't get away with putting out false stuff in that sense. If you've got the raw speech, now we know that can be deepfake, but assuming it's a legit speech, audio, video, you can't really say, well, he said this or he said that. In fact, I saw that I saw a couple of things going around. I don't know if it was supposed to be a joke in the first place, but I remember this meme with a video and was saying it had Putin saying all this stuff, anti-globalist stuff, which, whatever, I guess he's opposed to some. I got my opinions on that. He's opposed to some things in a particular sense, but I listened to the Russian. It was nothing close to what he was saying. But this meme was going around a lot in right-wing circles, and people like us, and because it aligned with what we would like to hear Putin say, since all the globalist controlled media is against him, then he must be a good guy, and so we want to believe when he's saying things that align with what we think, and so in some cases he does, but I think that's why Telegram is nice. And some of these OSINT guys on Twitter, it's nice to have, because then you can verify, is he really saying this or not? And there's so many people, that you can find that you trust. Like, I mean, I do that all the time on Twitter. Somebody will post a video and, people say, oh, I don't know what this says and da-da-da. And then I'll just, okay, here's what they say. Here's the translation. Or is this translation good? And yeah, this, here's who I am. This is my background. This is a good translation. So yeah, it's really amazing. And, Prigozhin, I guess he's a boomer. I guess we call him a boomer, but nevertheless, he's adopted. He's comfortable with the social media and whatever, and sort of lives on social media, of just making videos and whatever. But then he's an entrepreneur, he's a businessman, so he knows what it is to market, and to market himself. Sure. And that sort of thing. And he's also a psyop guy, so you have to pay attention. You have to pay attention to kind of the broad context and different things there are some things you need a little more insight, or have somebody that has a little more insight, to understand what might be coming at you with a guy like that, because he's all about propaganda, misdirection, and deception. So you just have to be very careful with anybody, any media. Big technique is put it out there. It sounds like something you would like to hear. So then, right. No, this is what he said. This is what he stands for. So that's a easy trap,
Now, I mentioned this before the show. We were talking backstage. My wife heard a podcast. She played it for me. This guy was Israeli intelligence, and they say Prigozhin stopped short in an area where there were nuclear weapons, and now has possession of some. Could that be a potential? Would that be something he would do?
Yeah. So is that in the realm of possibility? Well, yeah. There's a lot of stuff I can't say because of, documents I signed long ago, and I don't want to go to prison for no good reason. But I would say like this, something that I would characterize something, in the realm of possibilities, if it's happened before. You understand what I'm saying? So if you had a scenario where nuclear material or weapons were not secure in Russia and they were stolen and had to be recovered, well, if that's already happened, then yeah, certainly that's a realm possibility. If it's happened once, it can happen again. Now, did that happen? I mean, I don't know. We don't have the evidence of that. We have a testimony of this person you're talking about. Are they credible? Are they telling the truth? Who knows? But yes, beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is in the realm of possibility. So no one can say, no one could say, I can tell you 100%, no one could say, no, there's no way that could happen. That's 100% false to say it's nowhere that can happen. That's just like when Snowden came out, and said, here's what the government is doing, and here's the program NSA has, and they're spying on you, and blah, 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 blah. And I was watching Fox News, and their national security expert was on there saying, this can't happen. This is some 24-year-old, blah, blah, blah. You got to go through background checks. You got this badge and this and that and security, and you can't just walk out of NSA with a thumb drive. And I worked at NSA. I have personal stories of things that happened and things that were able to happen. I had the background check. I had the badge, the security clearance. Had to have code to get in these doors and all this crazy stuff, right? But what stopped me from walking out with secrets? You know what stopped me from walking out with secrets? Me. That's it. There's no security in NSA or most other places for that matter that says, no, this is an impossibility. I mean, the first day I got to NSA, we're sitting in a room and they're showing us film after film after film of all these spies that have walked out of NSA with classified material. So I'm like, who is this idiot on Fox saying this stuff? I researched the guy, found out he's a former deputy sheriff who started some IT shop selling modems And all of a sudden, he's Fox's national security expert. So I reached out to him. I said, "You're a moron. You don't know what you're talking about. I can share you some stories. I know this happened, so that can happen." I remember the first time. I mean, anybody can look up. I think his name's Pollard, Commander Pollard or Captain Pollard. Was one of the guys, stole the secrets. James Hall III, which my name. I'm sitting there watching these films. The guy, my name, James Hall. Here's James Hall III, stole secrets from for the Abrams tank. I don't remember if it was him or Pollard, but you had the security guards at the front door of the NSA helping him carry out bankers' boxes full of classified information and coolers full of classified information to stick them in the trunk of his car. So anybody that tells you, no, that can't happen because of security, that's utter nonsense. That's a person that's a liar or just ignorant. They don't know what they're talking about. So can we say this did happen? We'd have to have evidence to say that's what happened, rather than just the assertion. This is just an assertion until we have evidence. Am I saying it's a false assertion? No, I don't know that it's a false assertion. It could be true, but so only evidence would confirm that. But is it a possibility? Absolutely, 100%. Now, so your other part of your question, is this something in character for Prigozhin? I could imagine that being a scenario in connection with Prigozhin. Somebody's going to film, the murder of a guy with a sledgehammer and put it on social media for laughs. Could he snatch some sort of nuclear weapon for whatever purpose? Does he want to make a dirty bomb? Does he want to keep this for? Does he want to sell it to fund what he's doing? Does he want to keep it for leverage purposes? I can imagine many scenarios and many reasons why a person of his character would do something like this. So yeah, it's definitely not unbelievable from my point of view.
Because I'm kind of like, all right, is it possible? What's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario?
Absolutely.
And
100%.
And initially, when my wife said, "Oh, this guy is saying he has control of a nuclear weapon," I'm thinking, "Oh, you're controlling a silo." And then I'm like, "Well, wait a second, maybe a mobile launcher." I'm like, "Well, a mobile launcher isn't just an RV you drive down the road. There's support vehicles that go along with it, so that's not a feasible." But could you have material or a warhead? Yeah.
Correct. And they have the, whatever you call them, the suitcase, suitcase, tactical nuke, that kind of thing. So, I mean, there's all sorts of versions that you could certainly drive away with. And you got to remember, bro, he rolled in with 25,000 troops and vehicles and whatever. And then, who knows what happened in all the midst of that chaos. They're locking down Moscow. I mean, he literally took control of Rostov-on-the-Don. He had control of the city, government buildings, everything there. They basically set up, this is our new headquarters. We're taking over the whole town. And the regular military troops were hugging them, inviting them, cheering them. The people were haranguing the police and supporting the Wagner mercenaries and haranguing the police for trying to stop them. I mean, so that's another thing when Putin's little speech was, we all were united and we joined and everybody was united. That's a complete lie. They weren't united. Some of the stuff Putin says tells me that this is why I doubt, the sort of orchestration between Putin and Prigozhin, as this was their plan and their thing. That's the one I consider less likely, because just of the way Putin was expressing himself. This would be, talk about the 5D chess. This would be 20D chess if he's literally acting like this, contrary to what's expected of him in Soviet political culture. And, so it doesn't sound like Putin was in on it. It sounded like Putin was pissed and he was ready to whack the guy. And if Lukashenko can be believed, he talked him down, and they cut this deal to maybe because, again, Putin has this, maybe there's some little sympathetic connection, simpatico with this guy, or maybe he's scared of the assassins being turned on him. I don't know. But it doesn't sound like Putin was fully in on this thing. It would be the charade of the ages if that were the case. Now, the CIA angle of poking and prodding Prigozhin, I could believe that, and then having Prigozhin just, he betrayed all of them, and off he goes to his own military base and pocketed the check, and now he's in Belarus, and he's supposed to train their army, and then, who knows, maybe Lukashenko is going to start sending him all over the world. And he's still got his gold mines and diamond mines and all this stuff in Africa. He's still got connections with all these African nations, son of Gaddafi, all this sort of stuff. So Prigozhin's still still well-connected, powerful guy in that sense. But this also brings to my mind, and because of that, if he's so powerful and he's kind of making himself the rival of Putin, I think, like the former CIA director said, you better stay away from high windows. It's probably good advice. Probably good advice.
Right.
And Lukashenko is a known stooge of Putin. So at the end of the day, Prigozhin could be being set up, or who knows, maybe he and Putin make amends. It's hard to say. But Putin's going to somehow have to do something to recover his
image. Be some
image
sort of face
in his own nation.
effort.
Yep, absolutely. So what form that might take, who knows? He's shown himself to be what is the word? Reasonable as far as talking things out and really explaining. Like he said, every time you hear him give his reasonings behind what they're doing, it's totally the opposite of what you hear out of Western media. Like you can't help but come away with, sorry about that, you can't help but come away with the guy sounding like a reasonable guy. I think you probably still have audio, but I think my camera
we got audio.
Died. So anyway, that's my take, man. I appreciate you having me on. Sorry for going black on you, but happy to come back on at any time. We got to zoom over to another meeting where Chris Ann's going to be speaking. So we've been all day doing this Alex Jones show. Now we're headed over to another meeting in New Tampa.
Well, say hi to the family.
Thank you, sir. God bless you. Love you guys.
Glad to have you on.
Keep fighting.
All right, guys. Hey, thanks for joining us.